when understood properly, this novel I have here with me by Virginia Woolf contains insights into deep spiritual truths that you need to know about if you're someone who wants to develop and live spiritually. And as we live a more mindful life, we realize joy starts coming into our life, and peace and happiness and confidence and authenticity. That's the cure to everything, to find the present moment. Hello there, my name is Alex and welcome to another episode. I have another classic novel here with me, Virginia Woolf To the Lighthouse. And I have to be honest with you here, full disclosure, I haven't finished it and therefore I don't think I can give any sort of feedback or review it or even recommend it. But what I've read so far, I found it very interesting, and I have found a few excerpts that I really wanted to share with all of you, and therefore I have decided to do this video even before I finished the novel. Who knows, maybe I'm going to do another one after I finish. But yeah, this version I have here with me, it's a Penguin Modern Classics. It's a paperback edition. It's not very long, but it's a bit difficult to understand. If you know something about Virginia Woolf, she lived in the 20th century, and she is part of the movement in literature that is called modernism. And one of the things that characterized the modernist wave is an experimental writing style, which sometimes results in quite enigmatic sentences. And by that I mean that each sentence is like a puzzle almost that you really need to make sure to get right so that you get the meaning out of it. But it's been an interesting experiment so far, an interesting experience reading it. And what I found is that many times once I was able to solve the puzzle that is every sentence and actually got the meaning, I felt, how can I describe it? A sense of recognition, I would say, a sense that what she was saying is really important and really profound, and therefore I have decided to share some of those passages with you today. I've used this analogy before that's coming to my mind of a radar. I think that built in the human psyche is something like a radar. You know, a radar, how it works. It scans the field around it, and whenever it finds something of interest, it beeps, it highlights it, right? Obviously, that's a physical radar. I think we have a spiritual radar almost, which means that we have this built-in capacity as humans to recognize truth when it is heard. And I think that's what we want to rely in you. We want you to be able to develop this ability of intuition that recognizes the truth when it's heard. And that says, yes, that's true. Why is it true? Not because there's plenty of evidence, but because you know that in your heart that what was said is true and important to reflect on and consider, really. And reading the few chapters that I have read so far in this novel, I've found those moments of recognition, almost of enlightenment, we can say. It's like glimpses of enlightenment that I have found quite profound, and therefore I have decided to share them with you today. Speaking of enlightenment, the book is called To the Lighthouse, and another important characteristic of the modernist way of writing that I was telling you is that it is filled with symbolism, and the lighthouse in this book is a central theme, a journey to a lighthouse. The lighthouse represents enlightenment. The lighthouse represents the divine and one's personal journey of getting closer to it. So that's what this book is. It's about the spiritual journey. Of course, there are different levels to it, right? There's a superficial level that is quite dramatic, but there's also a more deeper level, which is about the spiritual journey, really. So it's quite interesting. Just a quick word to Virginia Woolf. She is most popular, better known for the feminist side of her writings, and this is no exception. Is quite powerful in the message that it delivers in terms of gender equality, really, and the dissatisfaction that the women characters in the novel have because they feel caged in the patriarchy almost of the society that they live in. But I think that in addition to that, and not usually recognized, Virginia Woolf is also, her writings have a very profound spiritual, psychological message in them, which is the one that I want to focus on today. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. The excerpt I have selected, one of the excerpts I have selected is the very beginning of the book, it's chapter 1. As I told you, it's a bit difficult to understand, but I'm sure we're gonna be able to go through it. And it starts like this. Yes, of course, if it's fine tomorrow, said Mrs. Ramsay. But you'll have to be up with the lark, she added. To her son, these words conveyed an extraordinary joy. As if it were settled, the expedition were bound to take place. And the wonder to which he had looked forward, for years and years it seemed, was, after a night's darkness and a day's sail, within touch. Quite poetic type of writing. But let's see if we can try to understand it. The mom is telling the son that they can do it tomorrow if it's fine. I think she means the weather. But you'll have to be up with the lark. It means if the weather permits it, we can do it, but we're going to have to wake up really early. And these words mean a lot to the son. They represent for him an extraordinary joy. He feels very happy when he hears these words. As if it were settled, the expedition were bound to take place. So the joy is coming because those words mean to him that the expedition, they are going to go on a journey. Where? To the lighthouse. The words of the mom in his mind mean that the journey is going to take place. And therefore, he feels very happy, very joyful. Because the wonder to which he had looked forward for years and years, it seemed, was, after a night's darkness and a day's sail, within touch. So he's very happy because that wonder for which he had been waiting so long is going to happen tomorrow. Since he belonged even at the age of 6, so he's 6 years old, and he belonged to the great clan which cannot keep this feeling separate from that, but must let future prospects with their joys and sorrows cloud what is actually at hand. So in other words, this is saying that even at the age of 6, he already belonged to that clan that we can call being human. What's the characteristic of this clan? That we let future prospects with their joys and sorrows cloud what is actually at hand. So in other words, she is already addressing one of the main faults, we can say, of the human condition, which is our inability to live in the present moment. And why is that? Because we allow future prospects, the future with their joys and sorrows, their perceived joys and sorrows, I would say, we let that cloud what is actually at hand, the present moment. So she's addressing the main dysfunction of the human being. This is what all spirituality is all about. Spirituality starts with the recognition of what is wrong, faulty with the human condition. And one of those important faults is that we are unable to live in the present moment. Why is that? Because our mind distracts us all the time with future and its joys and sorrows. In other words, our worries about the future, our thoughts about the future, our plans, our desires about the future cloud what is actually happening in the present moment. Since to such people, even in earliest childhood, any turn in the wheel of sensation has the power to crystallize and transfix the moment upon which its gloom and radiance rests. Okay, let's go again, slowly. To such people, everyone, the human condition, the human dysfunction, even in earliest childhood, any turn in the wheel of sensation, any feeling that arises now, has the power to crystallize and transfix the moment upon which its gloom or radiance rests. Any emotion has the power to overcloud the present moment. In other words, there is a moment that we always inhabit But we are never paying attention to it because our emotions, what happens in the moment, blinds us from the moment itself. We never pay attention to the space, we can say, the now, that allows everything to happen in it. We never pay attention to it because we're always paying so much attention to the content of the now. And again, this is one of the very basics of spirituality. It means non-physical, right? So spirituality is the recognition that there exists a dimension to life that is not physical. And that's what she's pointing to. And she's saying part of the human dysfunction is that, to start with, we are lost in future. We are always thinking about the future, and that prevents us from being here. And the second point to that is we never pay attention to the space that is the present moment, because we're always filling it with something. So take a moment to reflect on this. One thing I always say is that your life consists of only one moment, which is this moment. And part of the human dysfunction, part of why you can't be happy and you struggle so much, is because you never learned to pay attention to it. It's like a canvas almost. A canvas that allows the painting to be. In a similar way, there is a moment that allows everything to be. For example, silence is a good example. There wouldn't be any sounds without silence. Yet, who pays attention to silence? Or space. The space around you. The space allows every physical object to exist, to be there, but who ever pays attention to space? And on an internal level, there's an equivalent to that. There's a spaciousness that allows every feeling to be there. And what she's telling us here is that we never pay attention to that space because we allow the content of it to overcloud it. The wheelbarrow, the lawnmower, the sound of poplar trees, leaves whitening before rain, rooks cawing, brooms knocking, dresses rustling. All these were so colored and distinguished in his mind, the kid, that he had already his private code, his secret language. In other words, the sense perceptions around him, the wheelbarrow, the lawnmower, what are these? Sounds, the sound of poplar tree, leaves, brooms knocking, dresses rustling. All these sounds, they were so colored and distinguished in his mind. In other words, the kid is present. The kid has this ability to be present. And he's able to listen to the sounds around him. Can we try that for a second? Can we take that as an exercise for us to do? Can you just stop whatever you're doing, close your eyes if you want to, or keep them open if not, but bring all of your attention to the sounds, to the auditory perception, to any sounds around you. Don't judge the sounds, don't label them, just pay attention. And if your mind manages to distract you, as it probably will try to, let go of it again. Listen to it as just another sound. And you can hear the wind outside, or the noise of people doing their things around you, or man-made objects, cars, planes. And you can also hear your internal voice saying, "What are you doing? You're wasting your time." Though he appeared the image of stark and uncompromising severity, with his high forehead and his fierce blue eyes, impeccable, candid, and pure. In other words, when you're present, it shows. When you're present, there's confidence in you. Frowning slightly at the sight of human frailty. Probably his mother is elderly. So that his mother, watching him guide his scissors neatly round the refrigerator, he's cutting something in the refrigerator, imagined him all red and ermine on the bench, or directing a stern and momentous enterprise in some crisis of public affairs. So he's transmitting this aura of confidence so that his mom imagines as if he is in a very important enterprise, managing a crisis of public affairs. Anyway, let's move to the next one. If I can find it.
One eternity later.
So now this is another scene, and the mom is by herself. The monotonous fall of the waves on the beach, they live close to the shore, so I imagine they can hear the waves all the time, which for the most part beat a measured and soothing tattoo to her thoughts, and seemed consolingly to repeat over and over again, as she sat with the children, the words of some old cradle song, murmured by nature. I am guarding you. I am your support. Okay, let's go slowly. The monotonous fall of the waves, the sound of the waves, which for the most part beat a measured and soothing tattoo to her thoughts. The sound of the waves are a tattoo to her thoughts. In other words, they are always there. The sound of the waves is always in her consciousness, and seemed consolingly to repeat over and over again as she sat with the children the words of some old cradle song, murmured by nature. It's as if nature is talking to her in her mind all the time. I am guarding you. I am your support. But of course, it's easy to forget about that. Nature is always sending us reminder signals, reminders, alarms. Nature is always trying to awaken us. What does it mean to awaken? It means to return to the present moment. And nature, with its sounds, its sensations, the air, the sky, the flowers, the animals, all the beautiful things happening around us, which we rarely pay any attention to because our mind doesn't allow us to, all those things are always sending us messages. Be here. Return to the present moment. Look at the beauty of nature. Return home. I am guarding you. I am your support. But of course, these messages are very quiet most of the time, and I'm sure the same happens to Mrs. Ramsey. Most of the time, she's not aware of those things because her mind is too loud, and then we lose awareness of the waves, even though the waves are there. It's like, I remember when I lived close to a train track. Initially, it was very noticeable. But the more you live there, the more you start letting it go. And the more your consciousness starts dropping its attention to that particular sensation, to that particular sound. And then our thoughts just overcloud it, so that the message that life is sending us is no longer heard. Reminds me of this novel by Aldous Huxley. It's called Island. It's a very profound novel too, and I'm sure we're going to analyze it at some point. There is a very profound scene where this person, who's a journalist, he's traveling in a ship, and all of a sudden there's some kind of accident, and the ship wrecks and drowns, and then he loses consciousness, and then he wakes up in an island full of vegetation, and he doesn't have any idea where he is at, right? And he starts remembering about all of the story that led up to him being there. And all of a sudden, as he's lost in thought, lost in past, in this case, completely absent from where he is, lost in his mind, in past, all of a sudden, he starts hearing a voice. And the voice is saying,
"Hello, be here. Here and now."
Something like that. And the sound of the voice brings him out of his mind for a moment. And then he realizes that it is a parrot that's in one of the trees that is talking to him. It is the parrot that is reminding him to be present, to return to the present moment. Later in the story, he realizes that the society that lives in that island is an enlightened society. It's a spiritually advanced society. And the inhabitants in the island taught the parrots how to speak those words so that the parrots could constantly remind them to return to the present moment. And a similar thing is happening here. The sounds of the waves work as this constant reminder.
Hello, be here. Here and now.
Something like that. So, let's return to the excerpt. She's talking about the waves, the sound of the waves, acting on her as a soothing reminder that nature is guarding her. But at other times, suddenly and unexpectedly, especially when her mind raised itself slightly from the task actually in hand, in other words, when she is distracted, presence here means when you are totally with your task at hand. And when her mind is raised out of that, she's thinking about future and past and something different from the task at hand. Then the waves, the sound of the waves, had no such kindly meaning, but like a ghostly roll of drums, remorselessly beat the measure of life. Made one think of the distraction of the island and its engulfment in the sea. In other words, at other times, the sound of the waves wasn't soothing, but it was scary, remorselessly. And it was a reminder of the distraction of the island and its engulfment in the sea. Reminds me of my grandfather's house. He has a house that's built on top of a hill. And recently, because of so much rain, part of his house was destroyed because there was some sort of minor collapse of the hill, and part of his terrain was lost because it was destroyed. And I was having a conversation with my dad about this, and we came to the conclusion that eventually his house is going to disappear. Whether it is in 2 years, or in 20 years, or in 200 years, or in 2,000 years, or in 20,000 years, that house is going to disappear because the hill is going to disappear, probably. And the same here. She knows that at some point the sea is going to engulf the island that she lives in. It's inevitable. Let's continue. And warn her, whose day had slipped past in one quick doing after another, that it was all ephemeral as a rainbow. In other words, the sound of the waves reminded her that everything passes, that everything is ephemeral as a rainbow, that there is no real solidity to the world of physical life, to the external world of objects. This sound, which had obscured and concealed under the other sounds, suddenly thundered hollow in her ears, and made her look up with an impulse of terror. So the waves remind her of the impermanence of life. That's another of the core concepts in spirituality. It's called impermanence, which means everything ends. And to a mind that's only inhabiting the physical dimension of reality, that's really scary, like to her. But who knows? This is the very beginning of the book. I haven't read it in its entirety. Maybe I can tell you in the future if this changes. But to someone who has found the spiritual dimension to life, impermanence is not scary. This is a quote that I have written down here by Marcus Aurelius. You could live life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. So there is a great lesson in impermanence. It's a force that can bring you almost violently to the present moment. And all of this reminds me of another one that I have here in my small book of quotes, if I can find it.
One eternity later.
This is a quote by Ajahn Chah, who's a Buddhist teacher, a Buddhist master, we can say. One day, some people came to the master and asked, "How can you be happy in a world of such impermanence, where you cannot protect your loved ones from harm, illness, or death?" The master held a glass and said, "Someone gave me this glass. It holds my water admirably, and it glistens in the sunlight. I touch it, and it rings. One day, the wind may blow it off the shelf, or my elbow may knock it from the table. I know this glass is already broken, so I enjoy it incredibly." And I think that's the lesson that I wanted to discuss with you today. It's the lesson of returning to the present moment. Because your life might end tomorrow, who knows what can happen. And knowing that is a powerful reminder that all you ever have in reality, in contrast to what your mind convinces you, is this moment. But of course your mind doesn't want you to remember that, because your mind takes its energy from your identification with future. In other words, when you think about future and past, your mind is so active. That's how it feeds itself. So of course your mind doesn't want you to learn to return to the present moment. It's going to try to distract you every time. But guess what? Nature is here to help you. The sounds around you. So can we maybe finish with a few seconds of just presence and paying attention to the present moment? We can start by paying attention to any sounds around you and use them as anchors. The sounds of people around you, man-made objects, human-made objects, or nature, the air, the leaves, rain, but you can also use other tools as grounding tools, such as your body, which is one that I always recommend people to familiarize themselves with. Can you feel your body? Can you, for a second, stop and remember that you are an embodied being, that you have a body? How strange. How does it feel to have a body? Is something I constantly ask people. Of course, the answer is not verbal, is not thought-based. In order to answer the question, you need to feel it. Can you sense your body? Can you feel your feet? Your feet making contact with the ground. Or your legs or your back making contact with the chair. And suddenly, as you're able to find that feeling, which is difficult because it requires the narrowing of your attention, but as you do that, you realize you enter a state of quietude. When you're present, when your attention is here, when your awareness is here, the mind subsides. And other things flow into your consciousness, like the sounds around you, things that you wouldn't have paid attention to if you would have remained lost in your thoughts. So what's the lesson of all of this? To learn to return to the present moment and get out of your mind, out of future and past, as much as you can during your daily life. And to use anything that you can find as a reminder to do that. Whether that is the sounds of the birds outside, or the sounds of the waves, or the feeling of the breeze against your face. And as we live a more mindful life, we realize joy starts coming into our life, and peace, and happiness, and confidence, and authenticity. That's the cure to everything, to find the present moment. And I think I can leave you with that. If you have found this beneficial, I would appreciate it if you can support my channel by liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, whatever it is. And yes, I hope to see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time. Take good care. Bye-bye.